All right, I suppose we should kick this off. You may see me clicking over as people come in. I have to admit them. Can everyone hear me to start off with? Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Loud and clear, Guy.
Perfect. All right, now welcome. A couple of things before we start. There is a best way to view this. So you should be seeing right now the PowerPoint presentation, which I'll be going through, and myself. We've run a couple of these Zoom training sessions. So if you click up in the top right of your Zoom screen, there should be a view tab. If you go to that view tab, you can change it to side-by-side speaker view. What that'll do is that'll put myself and the presentation up together on the screen. And then there's a bar. You can slide that bar to make me bigger if you fancy looking at me, which I don't recommend, or slide it back and make the PowerPoint bigger. But basically, you'll get myself talking and the PowerPoint presentation as well. Okay, so muck around with that how you want. You can change the settings to whatever you want. Everyone does have their self muted, but just keep yourself muted. We do get some feedback sometimes. If you want to talk, feel free to talk. I've got the chat open. I've got the participant list here, and I see a couple of familiar names, which is good. Hello, everyone. I see Grant, Taz, a couple of people there, Brent, Matt. I see a few people that I know I've dealt with, Robert over in Taz. So welcome, everyone. Yeah, do keep yourself muted, but feel free. You can actually just hold down the space bar if you're on a computer. If you hold down the space bar, that'll temporarily unmute you, and then you can talk, or just click the unmute button yourself. Okay. Also, one other thing before we start, I would like to say, if you're comfortable leaving your cameras on, leave your camera on for me, right? I've got a screen in front of me, which is my presentation, and I've got a screen to the right, which is all your faces. If I can see your faces, at the moment I can only see Michelle. Michelle and Brent, who's not there. Now I can see Nima. If you're comfortable leaving your cameras on, leave your cameras on, because then I'm actually talking to someone. Okay, it makes it better for me. I can see you nodding. I can see if you're falling asleep. I can see all these things. All right. Hey, Brenton. So leave your cameras on if you're comfortable with it. If you're not, that's fine. Leave them off. But it's better for me because I'm actually talking to someone. Okay. All right. Before I start, does anyone have any questions about this, or is anyone having any trouble? Nope. Fine. All right. So welcome to this members event, Skilling for the Future. Michelle asked me to put something together about our training and about skilling for the future, basically. I'm going to go through this presentation. It's not very long. I haven't timed it perfectly, so it could be half an hour, it could be an hour, depending on your questions, your feedback, or how much I crap on, really, about other stuff. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Guy Brooks. I'm the training manager here at Weld Australia. We've got a little training department here in Wollongong. Our main office is in Sydney. We've got about 7 staff here now. So a few of you will have trained with Joe and Cornelis, right? So we've got Joe and Cornelis, and then Michael Pitt and a heap of other staff here. So whenever you're dealing with the training department, that's us down here. Some people will have dealt with the training inbox, which is Michelle and Brody, or myself. A little bit about myself. So I'm a Boilermaker by trade. Okay, so Boilermaker by trade. I spent about 10 years on the tools. I competed in a competition called Weld Skills. For those of you who know what that is, Weld as in the world, not welding. Weld Skills for welding, and I competed in London at the internationals in 2009. Competed in that. From that, I've got a heap of welding tickets and things, and I've also got my welding supervision, my welding inspection. I was a teacher at TAFE for a while, and then a head teacher at TAFE, and then my own contracting company doing inspection and supervision, and then I ended up here. So here in the training department, we're pretty busy. We've basically flipped everything around on its head for those of you who've done training with us in the past or face-to-face, and those of you who are doing training with us now, which is exactly this year. I'm actually delivering from one of the training rigs. Okay, so that's a little bit about myself. I will, before anyone asks, because I know this will be a question, I will put this presentation as a PDF and Michelle will work her magic and distribute it. So any of these hyperlinks and things should work to emails and stuff like that. Okay. Get rid of this. All right, cool. So I'm going to go through the status of welder training in Australia. So what do we have? I know you've heard people bang on about it, but we essentially have a skill shortage. Now, this is genuine. These stats are from 2019, but welding trade workers were down 8%, okay, from roughly 75,000 to 69,000 from 2014 to 2019. Now, these are genuine stats. I've seen this. I was teaching at TAFE. I watched course numbers drop down way down to one trade class in Wollongong. And it's starting to come back up now to there's probably 3 or 4 trade classes. This is just in Wollongong that I'm speaking of from personal experience. But welding trade workers were down 8% in 2019. Okay, certificate 3, which is your trade certificate completion, was down by up to 23%. Okay, and we actually have a rapidly aging workforce. So what I mean by that is there's a big gap. You have your highly experienced older welders or boilermakers or supervisors or inspectors, okay, who are just about ready to retire, got one foot out the door. And then you've got the up and comers, which are really young learning, okay, but there's nothing sort of in the middle. I've found there's a huge skills gap. So there's sort of the people ready to retire and then the apprentices, and there's nothing in between. So while they're through COVID and everything else and all these numbers in 2019, what I've seen happen is people aren't actually upskilling their workers. All right, there's been a big push for university. I'm all about university. It's very good, but I feel like trades haven't been pushed very hard in the past of recent times, and we have got a skills shortage or a big gap there. So this is about upskilling your workers. And this is also about for the workers themselves or the employees, upskilling yourself. Okay, the other thing is the lack of training available. So I'll go through, we advocate for TAFEs and stuff, is what Weld Australia does. Among other things, I'll just let Matt in 1 second, sorry. Among other things, so it's getting harder and harder for TAFEs to run courses other than a trade. So we're involved with the new MEM package, so the new units of competency, the training package, and due to prerequisites and a myriad of other things, basically TAFEs can't really run short courses because there's so many prerequisites, there's too many units to do, therefore they have to charge a commercial fee, which costs through the roof. So there's a lot to it, but basically there's a lack of training available. Okay. And if you look at these numbers, they're down 8% in 2019, that's pre-COVID too. I mean, I know some companies have benefited from COVID, but if you look at it, that's actually pre-COVID numbers. So I don't even have the 2022 stats. So the gist of it is we've got this skills shortage.
Is that Cert 3 trade completion? Is that any trade or welding trade?
No, it's specific to boilermaking. It's boilermakers. It's a Cert 3 in engineering fabrication we're talking about. That's specific to boilermaking. That stat there. Thanks, Chris. It's good. Feel free to chime in as long as it doesn't get too crazy.
How does those numbers, what does automation make up of that? Everybody's put in robots.
I don't have the exact stats of what the automation is. Not on me. I could look into it, but I don't have the stats here on me. Sorry, Steve.
Okay.
Okay, so now moving on from that, investing in your future. So what's the importance and benefits of upskilling your team? So I'm going to look at these in 2 ways, a company point of view and an employee point of view. Now, the importance and benefits of upskilling your team, increase productivity, less rework. Okay, that one goes without saying. If you get your welding supervision, your welding inspection, your IWS, your IWE, your IWT, the more educated you are, okay, the more you know in theory, but the less mistakes you'll make, the more analytical thinking you'll do. Okay, you'll make sure you've got the correct procedures and processes in place to make sure that things happen. So increased productivity, less rework. Increased employee satisfaction / retention. Now, I hear people argue either way. Increased employee satisfaction, I know myself, when I was on the tools. If my boss wanted to put me through a welding inspection course, I would have jumped at it. I would be ecstatic. And you feel like you're invested in, right? You feel like the company's got my back and they want to invest in me. So in terms of that, you've got a high employee satisfaction rate because they feel wanted and they feel invested in and like you value them. Therefore, I find that they actually want to stay. So it increases the retention. I know it makes me want to stay. If the company's looked after me and invested in me, it makes me want to stay. Now, on the flip side, some people say that they'll just get this qualification and leave. That may be the case in some cases, but I would find people would rather stay in their happy job if they feel appreciated, basically. Another one there is the internal capabilities. Okay, so your internal capabilities within your company. Now, I'm talking here contractors and things like that, stuff that you contract out, work that you contract out, the welding supervision, the welding inspection, any things like that, the QA, the QC work. Okay, so I see some of you are probably in management type, supervisor type roles. Right now, you would know that the contractors or labor is your highest expense. Right? If you can actually do that internally and inspect it internally, I mean, obviously you're not paying the rate for a contractor. Okay, so your internal capabilities. It also falls into things like ISO 3834 company certification, which I'll go on and talk about later. Right, so your company's internal capabilities. And the 3834 ties into the last one there, which is compliance. Okay, so you're actually complying to the standards that you have to. Now, when you're a small workshop doing small odd jobs here and there, you probably don't get as scrutinized, right? I see plenty of workshops everywhere. Some of your workshops probably don't weld to actual weld procedures and things like that. But as you get onto bigger jobs and work for bigger companies, they have QA, QC departments, and they make sure that you comply. If it says you need to comply to 1554 or AS 3992 or anything like that, right, there's your compliance side of things as well. Are there any questions before I keep going on? You'll see me looking over here because I'm looking at your faces. Everyone's fairly happy with that? And I forgot I put this little one in here. So that's what I just talked about. So 1554, which is your structural series, which I'll go on to, AS 1200, which is your pressure equipment series. And I talked about 3834 a little bit, which is your company certification. Right now, when you do your welding supervision, say you do your AS 1796 certificate 10 or your AS 2214, this is where this structural and pressure equipment that you're seeing there, I'll actually... So I'm looking here, your structural and your pressure equipment, right? Your 1554 series covers your structural stuff and your basically AS 1200, 1210 series covers your pressure equipment. Now they've got different requirements. For instance, to be a welding supervisor on your AS 1200 series or pressure equipment, you need to have your AS 1796 certificate 10. Or for your 1554 series, which is structural, you need to have your AS 2214. So there where those welding supervisor qualifications come in. And the last one we see there, ISO 3834, that actually ties into what they call a RWC or a responsible welding coordinator. So that's where you see the IWS, IWT, and IWE come into play. Okay, they're your responsible welding coordinators, which I'll go on and talk about a little bit further on. I'll go on a little bit more about the ISO 3834. So what is it? I touched on it. Basically, it's company certification. So it's a production quality control system. It's specific to welding. So a lot of you have heard of the ISO 9001 company accreditation, right? Well, this goes deeper again. ISO 3834 company certification goes onto the specifics of welding. So it controls the entire life cycle of the welding process, right? From design right through to inspection. It considers all aspects that could affect weld quality. Now, it's the minimum benchmark for welding quality globally. So the ISO series, the international standards, are basically recognized globally. It complements ISO 9001, as I said, and it ensures you have the right systems in place. All right. What company certification does, company certification helps Australian businesses demonstrate their ability to deliver a compliant quality fusion welded product on time and to budget. Right, so in having ISO 3834 company certification, these are the kinds of things that you are demonstrating. Now, I've put there more info. Okay, if you want any more info on ISO 3834, what happens is our engineers come out and they actually audit your company. They audit your company, have a look at your systems and procedures that you got in place. They do a gap analysis and tell you this is what you need. You need X, Y, and Z. You need a responsible welding coordinator, which is an IWS, or an IWT or an IWE. You need an inspector here. You need a welder register. You need all these things, okay? Now, company certification ties into, I think I've got it. It goes on a little bit further. All right, I've got 2 slides forward, which will show me what I'm talking about in a minute, but I'll talk about, it goes into certain companies and certain specifications say that you need to be ISO 3834 certified to even tender on the job. I've put them up in a couple of slides time, which I'll go through. Okay, so don't get left behind. What are the implications of doing nothing? Okay, now, a great man once said, and he'll have a laugh about this because I think he's listening, that if you're standing still, you're going backwards, right? Which actually makes sense to me, right? If you're standing still, your company's standing still and you're doing nothing, you're going backwards, okay? Because everyone else is moving around you and moving forward. So essentially, you're going backwards. Okay, so the implications of doing nothing, non-compliance, right? If anything happens and you don't comply, say you're working on a job, it was supposed to be the 1554 or 3834 or something along those lines, something happens, somebody gets hurt, okay, it's going to be on you. Now, increased cost of business. Now, initially the startup to get 3834 or anything like that, or supervisors qualified, inspectors qualified, things like that, it's an initial cost. It's a cost at the start, okay, but it pays dividends at the end. So an increased cost of business, okay, through contractors and those kind of likes, right? Unable to quote on jobs. I'll show you in a minute some of the standards that actually specify 3834, welding supervisors, inspectors, things like that. Okay, then losing work to offshore companies as well, or other certified companies. So other companies that are 3834 certified, they can tender on jobs that you can't, basically, or other companies that have got just welding supervisors, a Cert 10, and inspector. Okay, bigger companies start looking at these things. They audit your systems, they audit what you've got, and they want to know, do you have an inspector? Do you have a supervisor? What do you have in place? Now, I talked earlier, this is referring to 3834, right? Increasingly referenced in Australian and New Zealand standards, okay? AS 510 and the RMS actually in New South Wales, Steelwork for Bridges, they specify that you need to be 3834 certified to even tender on their jobs, okay? A lot of the European standards, it's being made a requirement. Okay, so EN 13445, unfired pressure vessels, welding of railway vehicles and components. Okay, they all specify 3834 company certification to even tender on those jobs. Okay, so some of you, you'll be hearing about 3834 for the first time. This whole thing isn't a plug just on 3834, but I'm just outlining that, what it is, the benefits. It ties into your RWC, your responsible welding coordinator. A lot of you are probably thinking, where does an IWS, IWT, IWE fit into things? This is where it fits into things. Okay, so when you're considering what kind of course you're going to be doing, you need to consider yourself as an employee, as an individual. Where do I want to go? Do I want to get work for a company that does work for the Roads and Maritime Services? Do I want to work in defence? What do I want to do? Well, am I better off having an IWS, or am I better off having a Cert 10 or an IWIB from a personal point of view? And from a company point of view, you want to look at, where does the company want to be? What do I want to tender on? Okay, do I want to tender on these jobs? this is getting more and more recognised and required throughout industry. I just want to go through, I mean, you hear me talk a lot about, you know, all these courses and doing courses and outcomes and things like that. But I've actually just pulled together, Michelle actually suggested this, one of you lovely people here suggested it to Michelle, and I've added it in. So I wanted to talk about actual outcomes. Now, what I did was we get feedback from all our courses. We keep the good stuff, check out the bad stuff. No, we don't. We take the bad stuff as well. And I just wanted to go through some of the things that I found, and I actually found a few really good ones. Sometimes it's easy to forget these things that have come by. So one there, these are actual things from people. So for our business, gaining an IWE and IWT for our leadership team, N2214. So this company put through an IWE, IWT, N2214. Okay, it's opened up pathways towards high industry certifications to DIN 2303 and EN 15085. Okay, which has allowed them to actually quote and scope on Australian sovereign capabilities, okay, like the Land 400 Defence Program and Business Cross River Rail Project. Okay, so that's an actual outcome that came out of this particular company investing IWE, IWT, 2214, the whole gambit basically. I'm sure they put on some IWIBs as well. Now that's from sort of a company point of view, people looking at it, but I just found some personal ones too. So short and sweet, this person, I did have a salary increase and new position due to the completion of this course, immediately on completion. I had another one, please find attached promotion I have achieved after completing the online welding engineers course. Right, I have his promotion attached, but I'm not going to show you guys the promotion. But these are actual outcomes, and these are things that happen. So I know I've said this before, but from an employee point of view, invest in yourself, and from a company point of view, invest in your employees. All right, so where to from here? Right, so a couple of things I would like to say. So I suggest plan your future, whether that's a company or an individual. What do you want to do? As I said before, if you are standing still, you're going backwards. Okay, plan your future. How many people do you see? You may be one of them. There's nothing wrong with it, but they are in the workshop. They've been there for 40 years on the floor, on the tools, and you see all these young up and comers come around you, go do inspection, go do something else and move on to other things while you're still standing still. I mean, there's other factors at play, but that's on you. If you can actually invest in yourself and invest in your future, okay, that shows your company that you're keen. And if they don't take it up and support you in that, then you move on and you've invested in yourself. For a company, of course, invest in the company, like I said, being able to quote on more jobs, having your own internal capabilities, not having to rely on contractors and things. Okay, so what are you contracting out? What would you like to tender on? Okay, so has anyone got any questions, comments? Feel free to talk. Add something, tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right.
The DIN 2303, there are grants available.
Okay.
And under the SADI,
Okay.
and you can get grants because IWE and IWS are very expensive. But
yeah, they are.
You can get 100% grant to do these if you're in that sector.
There you go. Look into that. Look into things like that. Thank you, Steve. So looking at things like that, there are some grants available. We secured a grant not that long ago. Some of you people from Queensland would know. Some of you may have done the course through the grant. We actually got the Queensland government gave a grant to us to support 80% of the course fees. They are expensive, especially your international welding engineer and things like that. But they are high qualifications. Okay, so thanks, Steve. And the last one, pathways. Now, I'm going to go on this pathway. I'll talk more about it, but the next one talks about from an apprenticeship level all the way up and where you'll go to, but I'm just using this as an example, and then I'll elaborate from there and we'll talk a bit. Okay, so the pathways. If you look at this one, apprenticeship or traineeship, it starts out with, I'll draw on here. Okay, starting up there. So apprenticeship or traineeship, right? You go from that, you go into a trade qualified welder. So most of our courses, I would say 90% of our courses, the minimum requirement is being a trade qualified welder or a boilermaker. So you Cert 3 in engineering fabrication. It's only if you're as old as our trainer, Joe Sandor, who's hopefully listening, that you'll have an actual trade in welding. All right, so a trade qualified welder or a boilermaker, which is your Cert 3 in engineering fabrication. Now, once you've got that, other things come into play, right? So if you go down the inspection pathway, we've got an International Welding Inspector Basic, an International Welding Inspector Standard. Okay, so you've got both those here, International Welding Inspector Basic, Standard, and then it actually goes on to Comprehensive. All right, so there's 3 levels there. Now, the basic level is a course that we run all the time. The standard level we're actually developing at the moment. Before anyone asks, I know there's a lot of people are jumping to get on this IWIS, International Welding Inspector Standard. We are developing that in a staged approach. So you'll be able to do an IWIB and then do some gap training and get your IWIS, as opposed to having to do the whole lot again as it currently stands. Right, so at the moment we're doing the IWIB, IWIS, and for those of you who have met Cornelis, our South African trainer, he is currently developing the IWIC. All right, so he's actually in South Africa at the moment doing that, working with the South African Institute of Welding. Right, once you've got your International Welding Inspector Basic or your standard level, what happens is you can apply to be certified. Now, being certified, when you complete an IWIB, an IWIS, or any of the IIW courses, you get a diploma. So you get an IWIB diploma, an IWIS diploma. So that is your qualification. That is valid. You can use it on the job. But what happens is you can apply to become certified. So the last step is certification, right? Now you can still perform the same role as your diploma level, but what certification does is it says that you've been working in this role for at least 2 years. There's different things, but there's 2 years or 3 years for certain ones. So what you do is you get your IWIB, you get 2 or 3 years experience. Okay, once you've got that 2 or 3 years experience, just let someone in here. Perfect. Once you've got that 2 or 3 years experience, you can apply to be certified. So you just submit what you've been doing, a bit of a resume, you go through, basically that's it, you go through what you've been doing. They confirm that yes, you've been working in this role, yes, you've got the experience, stamp of approval, you're certified. So Weld Australia will say you've been acting in this role and you're sufficiently experienced in this role. Now, what certification does is kind of gives a guarantee to employers that you're employing someone experienced. Okay, so the difference there being, I would guess if you go for a job and an IWIB applies or a certified IWIB applies and they're trying to toss up between the two, they're probably going to go with the certified person because that's their guarantee or the assurance that the person has actually been acting in that role. Does that make sense? So certification does require renewal after, I don't know how long. Certification looks after that, but it does require renewal. So it ensures that you're actually current. The next one that we're looking at is your responsible welding coordinator pathway. So the RWC, and this ties in with 3834. There's 3 levels of that as well. There's your IWS, International Welding Specialist, IWT, International Welding Technologist, and IWE, International Welding Engineer. Now, these 3 levels sit at what we call the coordinator level. Okay, so I suppose technically it sort of sits above the welding supervision next to it. So someone who is an RWC would probably maybe have a Cert 10 or a 2214 working underneath them and a couple of IWIBs. So they look after the whole thing. It's not saying they have to, but that's sort of where the hierarchy sits. Right, an RWC is someone who is probably more off the tools, where a welding supervisor is someone who's down there on the workshop floor with the boys, getting things done, making sure things are right, whereas the RWC more coordinates that. So there's the IWS, IWT, and IWE level, and they've all got different prerequisites. So I'm not going to go through every single prerequisite, but for an international welding engineer, you have to have an engineering diploma already. Okay, so if you don't have an engineering diploma, the highest level you're going to get is the IWT, International Welding Technologist, without getting that engineering diploma. The one over to the right of that is your welding supervision pathway. So that's your AS2214 or your AS1796 Certificate 10, which is what I mentioned earlier. So your 2214 is your structural supervisor, basically, and your AS1796 Certificate 10 sits under your boilers and pressure vessels. Right, the prerequisite for an AS1796 Certificate 10 is you need to have worked with boilers and pressure vessels in the past, including pipelines. Okay, so you may think I haven't worked on pressure vessels and stuff, but if you've welded any pressure pipe to class 1 or AS4041, then that's considered that experience as well. And also an AS1796 ticket. So your 1 to 9 tickets, your traditional 3E, 8G, MIG, TIG, stick, those things, all those tickets, that's one of the prerequisites. Is a welding ticket still required? Rodney said something. Is a welding ticket still required for Cert 9 and 10? So for Cert 10, that's what I was saying there, Rod. So Cert 10, you need a welding ticket. There is a separate pathway down, I think option C, where you need 3 years experience on boilers and pressure vessels and a few other things. I need to look exactly at the prerequisites, but we can determine that. It does require evidence, so you need to show that you've been working on it. You'll need to show welder qualification test reports, things like that, to prove that you've been working in the boiler, pressure vessel, pipeline industry. Okay, so the general route is go get yourself an AS1796 ticket, 1 to 9, any one of them. Okay, and then obviously you trade and apply for your Certificate 10. Now, a little bit more information on that. Your AS2214 and your Cert 10, how it runs currently, right? There is a paper A and a paper B. Now, a paper A is common to 2214 and Cert 10. If you look in the syllabus, right, paper A and paper B, or the first section, is common between the two. So what happens is once you've done paper A, you've done it. Okay, where it splits is paper B, which they call the application of standards. So the first assessment is paper A, which is closed book. The second one is paper B, which is open book with the standards. Danny knows all about that, which is open book there with the standards. I can see you there, Danny. Open book with the standards, right? So what happens is the course then splits. The 2214 people go and study the AS 1554 series, right? Parts 1 through to part 7. And then the AS 1796 people go and study all your pressure standards. So your 3992, your 4041, all those kinds of things. Okay, so you do a separate one. That's paper B1 and B2. Okay, and you actually have the standards with you. You go through all the standards and you answer questions on the standards. All right, and you need to reference them as well. So you go through and you have to have a look and you have to find answers. Right, now, that's really the big difference also between, if you look at the welding supervisor pathway and the responsible welding coordinator. So the welding supervisor, right, deals directly with standards and there's an assessment directly on standards, whereas the responsible welding coordinator probably has a more general overview. I wouldn't say more general overview, but there's not an assessment specifically on Australian standards. Okay, but what there is, it goes into 4 separate assessments. So there's 4 modules and you're assessed on each module. So you do 4 exams, 1 after each module. And there's no final exam. It's just you need to pass all 4 exams. Okay, and what it does is it goes pretty in-depth in module 2, which is the materials. Okay, so basically material science. So it gives you a bit more analytical thinking. Right, so it starts looking into carbon equivalence and carbon phase diagrams and why do things happen. Okay, so why does this happen? Why has this material cracked? Why has this happened to you? What's going to happen if I use a different type of material? Right, so it looks a little bit more at analytical thinking. the responsible welding coordinator. The Cert 10 on 2214 focuses more on the application of standards, preheating, post-weld heat treatment, things like that you might need on pressure vessels. Okay, I know a lot of people generally have questions about that. What's the difference between a responsible welding coordinator and a welding supervisor? There it is there. I'll go one further because I know what some people are thinking. What's the difference between a welding inspector and a welding supervisor? I hope no one quotes me on this. Right, so a welding inspector, let's start before that. A welding inspector is different to an NDT technician. Okay, so someone who is a mag particle, who tests for mag particle, or is a UT technician, ultrasonic, or goes and does the nicks and breaks and bends and things like that. Okay, they are not, although they're doing welding inspection, they're not a welding inspector. Okay, they're an NDT technician, a non-destructive testing or destructive testing technician. Okay, what a welding inspector is, they're the person who coordinates all that, and figures out what's got to happen. So the welding inspector looks at the standard and says, hey, this is to 1554 part 1. I need 10% mag particle, 100% visual, and these 3 joints need to have this or that or the other. So they're the person that coordinates that, right? The welding inspector, the IWIB level, does the visual inspection, make sure everything's all right, make sure everything's going properly. They do the checks while it's all happening. And then they're the ones who actually call in the NDT technician. The NDT technician does the testing, does the report, and gives that back to the inspector. All right, the inspector is the person who collates all that data, puts it all together, puts it in an MDR, maybe a manufacturer's data report, and keeps all that together. So that sort of makes sense. So that's the inspector. Now, what's the supervisor? Right, the 2214 or the Cert 10. It's a blend. It's a blend. The welding supervision, the welding inspection. I'm talking to myself here. I'm asking myself questions. Right? I hope you're interested in it. The 2214, the welding inspection and the welding supervision. Right? A welding supervisor is someone who works with the inspector. Sometimes they're also an inspector a lot of the time, but they never have the same role. Okay, and what happens is they're the person who goes through and qualifies the welders. Well, qualifies the procedures. So they're the person who writes maybe a PQR, right, and then does that and writes a WPS. So even though the inspector may supervise and watch the actual welder qualification test, your certificate 10 person is the one who looks at, okay, what is this material? Is this material a chromoly pipe, right? What about this material do I need to take into account? Does it need preheat? How do I know if it needs preheat? Do I get that from a manufacturer's data report? Do I get that from the material certs? Do I know what the material is? How do I figure that out? I look at the carbon equivalent. What's the chemical composition of it? I look at the carbon equivalent. I use that carbon equivalent to determine preheat, right? And then we look at, okay, does this need post-weld heat treatment? Right, we're talking, remember for your Cert 10, we're talking boilers and pressure vessels. Right, so does this need post-weld heat treatment? Right, if it does, what does it need? How do we calculate that? What heat should I hold it at and for how long? Okay, so your Cert 10, your welding supervision goes through all those aspects. Right, it goes through your inspection pathway, doesn't go into any of the metallurgy. Your inspection pathway goes into different test methods and what they test for. But when you go into your welding supervision, it goes into the metallurgy, not as much as the responsible welding coordinator, but it goes into the metallurgy. So you start looking at your carbon equivalents, you start looking at your carbon phase diagrams. Okay, does that make sense? Sort of. I can talk for days on this. Chris, you saying something? Can't hear. Can anyone else hear Chris?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear.
Yeah, that's better. What's the minimum requirements for the compliance to ISO 3834 out of these qualifications?
There's So for a company to be ISO 3834 certified, you nearly need all of these, right? So you'll need a welding inspector, like from a company point of view, right? So they'll need a welding inspector or have the provisions for inspection. So if they don't have an inspector, they'll need to say we have access to this contractor or that contractor. So ISO 3834 is a whole quality system. So it looks at, do you have a welding inspector? Do you have a responsible welding coordinator? Who is basically, if you're tossing up between a responsible welding coordinator, like the RWS, RWT, RWE pathway, or a Cert 10 2214 pathway, right? You need to look at where you want to work, right? The Cert 10 2214 is specific to Australian standards, right? And probably, I would say at the moment, more in demand than a responsible welding coordinator. The Cert 10 2214 is etched in everything that we do in Australia. Basically, they're always looking for a Cert 10 or a 2214 welding supervisor, right? It's when companies start looking at 3834 certification, right, that they want a responsible welding coordinator. And it's still, and a responsible welding coordinator can act as a welding supervisor as well. So they're kind of, the roles are interchangeable, but if they're working to Australian standards, especially pressure equipment, you got no choice. They say, we want a Cert 10. The standard says you must have an AS 1796 certificate 10 to work on boilers, pressure vessels, and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
We got rid of, we used to have it was a WTIA, welding inspector level 1 and level 2, right? And they are the IWIB and IWIS. So they're not invalid if you've got one of those, but basically there was an IWIB and IWIS, a welding inspector level 1, a welding inspector level 2. They were essentially the same thing. Okay, so we've just stuck with the international standards because they're more recognized. Okay, so if there's any questions around that where you see someone's got the old inspection qualifications, it's the same thing, but we just don't offer it anymore. We've sort of taught it out. Okay, how much uptake, Rob, how much uptake would you say there is currently in the industry for RWCs? So there is a fair bit. You just need to look at companies that are 3834 certified. So correct me if I'm wrong, I was talking to Sally Wood about this, but we've got, if you're a member, which this is a members event, so most of you, or all of you should be, there's a members directory and you should be able to look up companies that are 3834 certified. If not, there's ISO3834.com.au, which is what we run.
That's correct, Guy. There is a directory on that.
Yeah, so there's a directory of 3834 certified companies. So they would be the people looking for a responsible welding coordinator. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Rob?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah. Look, at the moment, out of our 2 courses, the Cert 10 2214, we're probably having double the amount of students through that. But I think that's just because it's just the traditional pathway and it's actually less time. So it's less time and it's a traditional pathway. I think that's why. The Cert 10 2214 is a more hands-on type approach. The RWC is a more theoretical, analytical thinking type approach. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks for that.
Okay. Any other questions or anything? How long have we been banging on for? Whew. All right. So we'll get rid of this. Move on from that.
Time flies when you're having fun, Guy.
Time does. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm glad that some of you left your cameras on. Thank you. It helps. It helps when I'm talking to someone. Right. So what we do, I'm just going to get all these up at the moment because I've talked a fair bit about the stuff we do. Right. I don't want to go on about 3834 anymore. So a little bit of stuff that we do as Weld Australia. So advocacy. So we are not an RTO in the sense of a TAFE. Okay, we're a not-for-profit members organisation, basically. So we're based on memberships. I'll just get you to mute yourself there, Carl, I think it is. So advocacy. So we advocate on behalf of industry, TAFEs, quality and safety and standards. So we've got a gentleman, if any of you have dealt with or listened to Bruce Cannon. Okay, Bruce Cannon sits on the board of Standards Australia. He has been doing it. I heard a story. He drafted Tech Note 7 on a typewriter. Legitimately, he drafted Tech Note 7 on a typewriter. Okay, so he has been around the traps and he knows what's going on. So he sits on the Standards Australia committee, and anything that you guys bring up as members or the industry groups bring up as members, okay, if there's anything that we can do and we can change in a standard that's better for industry, we will rally for that and advocate for that and actually sit on those standards committees to try and get those changes that need to happen for industry. Okay, TAFEs, we work with TAFEs. As I said, we're not an RTO in a TAFE sense, that we don't deliver your trade. We don't deliver a Cert 3, we don't deliver a Cert 4, we deliver International Institute of Welding diplomas, all right? They're your IOW courses. And then we also issue our own Weld Australia, your welding supervisor, so your Cert 10, your 2214. And we also do welder qualification, which is the AWCR, the Australian Welders Certification Register. Right, so advocacy, we do those kinds of things. Certification I talked about. Company I talked about, ISO 3834. Now the individual, which I was trying to remember is right there, the Australian Welders Certification Register. So what we do is we've got a platform called WeldQ. Right, what WeldQ is basically exactly as I said, a platform to qualify welders and examine people and issue certificates. So if someone or a company gets ISO 9606 certified to a welding procedure, you can actually use WeldQ and the AWCR to facilitate that as a company. All right, so you can use WeldQ, they can put in an application there. You fill out everything about that welder, and what will happen is it'll actually generate a certificate, a Weld Australia certificate, and it'll give you the range of qualification and things like that. All right, so that's the Australian Welder Certification Register. And it pretty much serves as a resume as well. So when you as an individual create a WeldQ profile, what happens is you put in a resume, you put in your qualifications, you put in those kinds of things, and then it serves as sort of a resume for you, okay? But also it holds all your welder qualification test reports. So if you get a 9606 welder qualification, that actually goes onto your profile. I don't know how many people here have done a welding test and you've never seen the certification in your life. The company squirrels it away, it's gone. I mean, they paid for it. But this platform actually hosts all that and facilitates the issuing of certificates, your ISO 9606 and the like, which is welder qualification. Okay, engineering services. So consultancy, we've got consultants all around. We've got engineers, welding engineers in Queensland, Western Australia, Victoria, and of course our base, New South Wales. So we've got a few in New South Wales and all around the shop. So basically they go around and provide consultancy to industry. If you were to, or your company was to get 3834 certification, one of these engineers would go out and audit your company. Right? If you've got any questions or anything, if there's a big job, if there's something happening you need a solution to, they can come out and actually give you advice on that, do some consultancy work, all the way down to qualifying welders and weld procedures. Okay, and the last one there is training, which I've talked about. Right, so I've gone through the inspection courses, I've gone through the welding supervision courses, okay, and the welding coordination. The other one I want to talk about is some of the smaller courses. So we offer, if you have a look down here, right, we've got a welding fundamentals course. So the welding fundamentals is for anyone. There's no prerequisites. What it goes through is six core topics. One is WPS and PQRs, another one's welding inspection, another one is standards, It goes through 6 core topics that we think that people need to know about. So if you're maybe a QA/QC person, or you've got QA/QC personnel who don't really know a lot about welding, but they're going around, you know, with welders, with boilermakers in workshops on site and things like that, right? This is going to give them a better understanding of standards, what standards apply, why we're looking at these things. It goes through process as one of the modules. You know, some people working QA/QC and they're going through and inspecting, say, inspection test plans, ITPs, and they don't know anything about welding at all. Okay, so it's a good actual all-round general course that you can put a few staff through, right, which will give them a better understanding of the welding industry. Right, your AS 1796 certificates 1 to 9 theory. Now, hot topic, controversy, right? AS 1796 at 1 to 9 theory. People struggle to get an RTO to run the AS 1796 certificate 1 to 9 theory and practical. So we developed it as an online platform delivering like this. Okay, we put the course up not that long ago. We had 2 people enroll. Right, the problem with it is you need to do a practical, right? And we don't have the facilities to do a practical, nor do we have workshops nationwide. Okay, so the AS 1796 Cert 1 to 9 theory at the moment is a case-by-case basis. So if your company wanted to get 5 or 6 people an AS 1796 ticket, we could then talk to you, do a quote, and we can come out and actually do that training in-house for you guys. All right, as well as the welding fundamentals. If you've got enough people, say you've got 10 people, you want us to come to you, we can come to you. All right, which leads me into over there, custom in-house courses. So we will, if you've got certain topics that you want delivered, we will put together something on those topics for you to an extent. Right, so come to us if there's certain things that you want to know, if there's a certain course that you'd like run. If you look at the welding fundamentals and you say, I like 5 of those topics, but I'd like a bit more on metallurgy, right? We can actually customize that, bring in some of that metallurgy stuff and come to you and actually run the course in-house. Joe is itching to get out after COVID. He's already been out, but he wants the next one booked in. Right, he loves it. So Joe Sandor, for those of you that know him, he'll go around and come to you. Are there any questions there about any of that so far? What are the custom in-house items? Are these available for the understanding of 9606? So we can run a course. If you, Matt, if you get my email, which you should already have, or the training team, right? Just send us an email with what you want and we can put stuff together. So we've got ISO 9606 theory available. We've already got the theory syllabus for that ready to go. We actually run that theory when we run 9606 training. Right, so we go around to TAFEs and things and do industry currency for TAFEs, and it all ties into, if you look at the bottom here, AWTCs. So the AWTCs is the Advanced Welder Training Centres, right? That's what we accredit. So you've probably seen us going on about, thank you there, there's my email there, g.brooks@weldaustralia.com.au, right? You've probably seen the Soldomatics, which is the augmented reality welders that we go around and commission and use at TAFEs and things like that, and we promote. We accredit Advanced Welder Training Centres. So if you buy a few, say a TAFE buys 6 or 7 of the Soldomatics, what we do is we go there with you, we set those up, we show you how to use those, we train the teachers, and as part of that, we do what's called a train the trainer. All right, in that train the trainer, we go through how to qualify someone ISO 9606, how to use these augmented reality welders, things like that. They are available individually. If you want any more information on these Soldomatics, we can send out packs. Right, we've got information packs. You can buy one just for your company, one individual one. If you'd like to do some training without going through consumables or being burnt or anything like that, that's an option there as well. Any questions? Comments? All right, a little bit about our membership. Right, so Weld Australia membership is an investment in the success of your career or the success of your business, right? So you will have seen recently we offered tiered levels of membership. So what we've got student, right? Student membership. So student memberships are free. If you're a TAFE student, you get free membership to Weld Australia. Okay, we've got individual membership, which is yourself, okay, the individual. We've got corporate membership, premium corporate, and technology networks. Now, the technology networks goes all the way up to infrastructure, electricity technology networks. They're the big players on the scene. They're the big companies who all get together. We facilitate these technology networks, and they all get together and they have safety meetings and share data and share findings and share latest technologies, and we facilitate all that, okay, for these technology networks. Now, I'm not the expert on technology networks. I don't run them, okay? But we have technology networks, which is the huge, big corporate companies, and then you go down premium corporate, individual, and student. When you go to enroll in a training course, you'll see the tiered pricing. Okay, so a premium corporate member gets a little bit more off than an individual member. Okay, for training courses I'm talking about. All right, what I've also said is there's also associate membership. So if your company gets a corporate membership or a premium corporate membership, now these are all company levels, right? What you're allowed to have is associate members, X amount. It's a fair few, right? Don't quote me on the numbers, but associate members, all right? So say Guy Brooks's Fabrication has a premium corporate membership, right? You can actually have associate members. So anyone who works for your company, we give them a corporate partner code, and then they get free membership, and they piggyback off your company's membership for the magazine and things like that. All right, and any discounts on courses. Now, what do you get out of membership? Now, a couple of the monetary things. Sorry. So what we give out monetary things, Australian Welding magazine, right? So we do a quarterly magazine. I can see one of the top editors in the guest list, right? So the Australian Welding quarterly magazine. We give out a monthly newsletter, so that's Weld Connect. So you see those come through, right? Technical guidance notes. So for those of you that know Weld Australia and old WTIA, we've got the tech notes, okay? And we've got technical guidance notes. Now, technical guidance notes are free for members. Not the full tech notes, but the technical guidance notes. So there's things like a guide to ISO 9606, right? Technical guidance notes are free. All right, see you, Taz. We've got a job board. So if you have a look for certain membership levels, you get free advertisement on the job board. So we've got, say, for instance, like I know Monadelphous was advertising jobs and things. So obviously you as an employer, this is going to go out to Weld Australia members, and you're going to be hitting the right target audience. So we've got the job board, we've got a members directory, which I talked about, and we've got members events, which has been hampered due to COVID, but such as this, we try and put on free events, free information sessions and things like that for members. Talking a lot?
Doing well.
Okay. How we deliver value to our members, like I said, networks, I'm not going to go on too much, right? Networking, right? Technology transfer, learning, which is what I'm all about. I'm all about the learning, being in the training department, technical solutions, which is our engineering departments, voice. If you've looked at any of Jeffrey Crittenden's speeches and things, he is not afraid to say what he thinks, and certification. So you've got your IIW company certification, those kinds of things. All right, and the final one is questions and contact. Right now, as I said, I will somehow, Michelle will send you all out a copy of the PDF of this file, right, or this presentation, so you can get any of those contacts that you need. Does anyone got any questions or anything? I wanted to make this sort of informal-ish, just a bit of a conversation or me talking, basically. Anyone have any questions or anything? Anything not clear? Kind of want to outline training, the different pathways, the value of membership, and investing in yourself and investing in your company. Hope I kind of.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Matt. Is that Matt talking?
How you going?
Good, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, good. Quick question. Heading down the ISO 3834 path. Like,
Yep.
We've already got ISO 9001 and API Q1 and 4F and international qualifications.
Yep.
What is the timeline from engagement to preliminary review to audit and eventual certification?
It completely depends on where you're at. They could do an audit, right? So because you got ISO 9001 company certification, like I said, I'm not an expert in 3834, but you would be halfway to 3/4 of the way there, right? So by having ISO 9001 company certification, you would already have these systems in place. They would just be checking and doing any gap analysis between welding specific things. So do you have a welder register? Do you have qualified welding procedures, right? Do you have, like, where's all your documentation strictly related to welding? Okay, so you would be 3/4 of the way.
We have a 5-day annual audit with an international auditor that covers all that stuff, right?
We have one, are you saying?
Like with our current certifications, we get audited by an international auditor for 5 days every year.
Yep.
No, I think we'd be compliant. I was just wondering if, like, is there nominated, like it has to be 3 months or it has to be 4 months, or is it like sitting the exams where it's only twice a year? Or
I'm not sure. I'm not the expert in this area, but if you...
I'll send Matt Polo's details, and Polo can speak to you directly about that.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, so look, I'm not the expert on that area. I do know that they are onto that. So they like the 3834. I talk to them. They're always out auditing companies, doing a gap analysis. They're pretty onto it, right? We've got the engineers in all different areas, and that's essentially what they do, right? They go out and their job is to help companies, to help members. Okay. Sorry, I don't know the specifics down in that, Matt.
no, that's fine. Thank you.
Right, just to help out with that, we've just recently sat the 3834 cert here at GM. We get it done every year, so it's once every year.
Yep.
So we get pretty much checked once every year to make sure that we're compliant.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Okay. So yearly, it looks like. Once you're there, yearly. And the time and how much you'll have to do, Matt, will depend on where the company's at. You may just need a responsible welding coordinator, or you may have everything in place and already the people there. Depends on what the audit brings up.
No worries.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? I'm happy to help answer questions as long as they're easy. No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. You've got my contact details there. That's in the chat, my email. As I said, we'll distribute out this presentation. I hope you got something out of today. If not, the...
And I'll send out a 2-minute survey, and people can put their feedback. So that would be great if you can.
It'll all be good. If you just put like 10 stars, it relates directly back to me. I get a kick. No, I don't. Yeah, so if everyone's happy, I'm happy. Thank you for all being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for leaving your cameras on for those of you who could. And thank you for interacting.
Hey, before we go, I've got a question that might be more for the group. It's Matt again.
Yep.
What other, I suppose, businesses doing as far as welder qualification, weld procedure, specification, qualification across multiple standards, right? So we're doing a pressure piping job, it'll have to be the B31.3. If we're doing the structural side of a pressure piping job, it's the 1554 Part 1, and we try and capture as many different standards when we qualify the procedures. If you qualify to ISO 9606 or one of the ISO standards, is that a better blanket coverage?
ISO 9606 is probably the most versatile, so it's accepted in all the Australian standards, right? So yeah, your ISO 96 is probably your most versatile. You would have to look at your range qualification for that in terms of positions that are qualified and thicknesses that are qualified and range and things like that. You need to look specifically at range of qualification. Okay, but a lot of people are now using the ISO 9606. For one,
My question is more probably to the other businesses online on the seminar, as far as, you know.
oh yeah, yep.
What's your client input on that? Do you know what I mean? Like we work direct and non-direct through tier 1 or prime contractors, and you know, the Origins, the Sanoses, the, you know, the defense direct, and whether it be carbon or non-carbon. Has anyone had a lot of success with qualifying under ISO, or as opposed to, you know, it goes to a third-party engineering firm that don't really know welding, but they've been awarded the contract and they're the guys that have the final say on whether your B31.3 procedures, which is ASME 9, are going to be accepted, or whether you get away with an ISO qualification, which is a blanket right across, you know, your piping division?
It really depends on what it is you're actually doing at the time. I mean, we qualify some of our welders to ISO 9606. Basically for us, it's structural. So most of our work is structural, so it's not pressure vessel or anything like that. So for me to qualify my guys, depending on the procedures of what we're doing on the actual job, generally I'll just do a butt weld for the guys. And that basically requires stop starts in the middle of the procedure during your runs or whatever you do, and that will qualify them for certain plate thicknesses and stuff underneath that. So it really kind of depends on what you're doing. In regards to ISO 9606, we do a lot of work for TMR up here in Queensland. They don't like that. They actually want us to get tested regularly. So, and do that 38, 34, we get tested. I test the guys on their basic procedures that they do all the time, every 6 months.
Yeah.
So it really, it's really going to come down to who you're doing the work for and what they want from you. 9606 is a better way to go. You get qualified for 3 years if they're happy with that. And basically every 6 months, you just have to verify that they're doing the same thing consistently. So if you're doing something that's consistent, that'd be the way to go. But if you're going to chop and change between it, it really comes down to the company that you're doing the work for, yeah, and what they're prepared for you to be happy with, and sort of what welding that you're doing on it, you know.
No worries.
Thanks, Brent. Anyone else got any input into that? Any experiences with that, things like that? No. Any other questions? Feel free to chat. No? Okay.
Guy.
Yep. Lucas?
Mate, how you going?
Good.
It's good. I've just done the 2214 and the Cert 10 as well recently. Looking at going into doing the IWS. One of the weld engineers that I'd worked with told me that if I've done those 2 supervision courses and the IWS, and then later down the track I wanted to get into the inspection, with those you bypass the IWIB and you can go straight into the standard.
You can go straight to the IWIS, yeah. So if you've got an IWS or the Cert 10, you can go straight into the IWIS. Yes, you can. You can skip the IWIB. Alternatively, like I said, we don't have the IWIS available right now, which is what we're working on, because there's a new release for pathways, and now you can do it in a staged approach where, as I said, you do the IWIB and then some gap training and do the IWIS, which is where we're heading. And I want it to be like that because it makes more sense. At the moment, if I ran one right now, even if you had an IWIB, you would still need to do the whole course due to the IIW guidelines. Okay.
Okay.
So yes, that is true. Similarly, if you If you've got your welding supervision, your 2214 or your Cert 10, you qualify for training pathway 2 of the IWS. So you miss the training for module 1 and half of training 2 modules. So instead of doing 5 modules, you do 3.
Okay,
Which
thanks for that.
reduces-
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, which
just about to
reduces
sign
the
up
cost of the
for
course.
the
as well.
IWS.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Do-
all
do-
right. Thanks
do-
very much, mate.
Do you know Joey? Did you have Joey delivering it?
I did, yeah. I had him with both of them for the standards. Yeah.
He's a good
he was-
bloke, isn't he?
he's a
And
good teacher,
Cornelius?
yeah.
You met Cornelius as well?
Oh, I've seen some of his videos, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yep. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Thanks very much, mate. I'll be in touch.
Pleasure. Anything else? Any other questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, Guy, when you talk about the
Yep,
standard, you said it's a few months away or whatever it was. I did see it on the WTI for a while. How long? What's the sort of time frame do you think before?
Look, I'm
that will
gonna run one this year. I want to run one in the second half of the year. I know it's approaching. We're just understaffed. We're understaffed in terms of what we're doing. We are flat out. We're also doing, for those of you that have been playing along at home, we're doing what's called the MEM project. So we're developing resources, which hopefully TAFE will use. And we've got a whole production crew on that. So we're just struggling for resources. It's a resource problem for us. We haven't got the people to develop it properly. We do, but they're utilized elsewhere. So I'm going to run an RWIS this year, latter half of the year. Right? There's going to be one this year. Promise. There has to be. I've got a list as long as my arm, Matt, and you're on it for the IWIS. I really do. I know. Honestly, I have a list of, I reckon, 60, 70 people who want to do an IWIS. Anything else? Sorry, I don't have a definitive date, Matt.
No, that's fine. I understand.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for your time. And hopefully I'll see you on a lecture sometime or on a course, or meet you in person. Who knows?
Mhm.
All
Thanks,
right.
Guy.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Guy, you there?
Yep.
You're the host. Can you stop the recording?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and save it to the cloud.
You wanna have a chat, Dave, or have I put you to sleep?
That was well done. Well done. I've created like a mini survey, and once you cut the recording, I can send that as well.
Yeah, we'll Nima will edit it all. Nima does a good job. We'll get it all edited, nice. Put Weld Australia intro on it.
It's actually recorded in the Weld Australia login, not the training one. So does Nima have access to that?
We record it externally. We record it
okay.
better again, so we won't use that. We use that recording as a backup.
Okay.
We record it externally on a better
Okay.
thing.
Well, send me the link and I'll send them together, the recorded version and the survey.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, it took me an hour. We're good.
Well done. Maybe a bit more.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. That was great. Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.